So I have been reading recently You Have the Magic by Haley Hoffman Smith, and there's quite a lot in this book that I kind of want to talk about. I'm not part of a book club, so you guys are going to have to listen to my thoughts and feelings on it because there's some really great stuff in here that I actually think would be really helpful for a lot of people. So I would probably like to go into more detail about the separate sections at some point, particularly the EFT tapping, which I think deserves its own kind of space to talk about. But essentially this book is kind of broken down into 3 components. So it's kind of like your conscious mind and exploring that, your subconscious mind, and then trying to tap into your subconscious mind and kind of rewire some of that wiring, that neurological space there, and the neural pathways, and kind of change them, make them more positive. And so you can unlock some internal blocks. So a lot of this sounds a bit woo-woo for a lot of people, but basically, like, this has been really interesting to me because basically the first task is for you to kind of look at your conscious beliefs. So you start by looking at all elements of your life, career, friends, family, and you write things that you believe are true to you. And that's really eye-opening in and of itself. Like your beliefs you have around family, romantic relationships, career, finances, health, things like that. And then your subconscious, you start kind of looking at, so your conscious is like your mental barrier, and that's what it gives out to the world, and that's the thing that you feel like you have an element of control over. But your subconscious mind is everything that you've picked up along your life that's buried deep inside, that the conscious mind doesn't necessarily have a conversation with. It's like your internal filing cabinet. So your conscious mind can say, oh, I think this. But your subconscious mind will not necessarily agree with your conscious mind. Again, this sounds a little bit woo-woo, but essentially being curious about your subconscious mind is really interesting because there's things that you filed in the filing cabinets of your brain about things like finances, career, relationships that happened when you were a child, or they might have happened when you had your first relationship, and you filed that as a truth, and that lives in your subconscious. And it creates a block. So sometimes if you've experienced things in your life where you're like, I want money, I want a career progression, I want to meet my soulmate, but it seems like nothing I'm doing is happening consciously. In the conscious world, I'm looking for it, I'm applying for things, I'm applying for jobs, I'm going on dates, I'm doing whatever, but nothing is kind of happening. What this book, it kind of goes deep, but it kind of explains that subconsciously you might have been blocking yourself because you might say internally, you might have created this belief that you are not worthy of career progression, that love is always going to be painful or hard, or you're not the kind of person that will meet your forever person. And so even though consciously you're like, okay, I want to go find that person, I want to go find that job, like, why is it not happening? Subconsciously, you believe the opposite. And so you're blocking these things from coming in. So I just think that's like so interesting. And what happens in the subconscious mind is you've created evidence for it, okay? So with the subconscious has not just decided to block you intentionally. Basically, your subconscious is your safety network inside. So you've learned from friends or family, from like life experience, that something is unsafe. So your subconscious has said like, okay, love is unsafe for me. Career progression is unsafe because of something someone said, or the way someone hurt you, or what happened. And so you have to then, and this book is quite good at talking about that, go into that memory, kind of bring it up into from your subconscious to your conscious mind, and then try and rewire it. Go back to that emotion, try and change how you feel about it. I will go into this in more detail if anybody's interested, because it is really fascinating. And EFT tapping is kind of the way in which you change that memory from something that was kind of a worry or a safety protection into something that should be safe. And you kind of then train your brain, love is safe, it's not painful, or a career progression is safe. And you kind of work on twisting it from that safety element, moving it and ushering it into this positive openness and willingness to receive. And then through EFT tapping, people have found that they are more open to career opportunities, that their outlook is more positive, that they can, you know, find somebody because they've kind of tapped through that emotional block. But I thought it was really interesting because essentially a lot of people in the romantic field, in the career field, in the finance field, people feel stuck in those areas of their life, and they're kind of saying, all I want is happiness in those areas, and it always feels like I'm just unlucky and it's not for me. But then looking at it from this angle and believing that actually subconsciously what your friends and family and yourself, what you've internalized about your belief of whether you are worthy of these things and why, has had an impact on what you end up achieving or experiencing or accessing. But what's really empowering is that this book is essentially saying you have the power to unbreak those things. You learnt them as a child without much investigation into why they were there. They were just kind of, they grew up with you. And now as an adult, you get to have the power to turn around and say, essentially, I want to investigate this. I want to investigate my conscious beliefs and my subconscious beliefs. Where's that coming from? Where is the real evidence that love is difficult, or finances are hard, or I'll never get the career I want? Where is the evidence for that? And then you become like a detective. You go and write down and think about all the evidence you've ever had for that, and you challenge it, because a lot of the time your subconscious will record things into your filing system and say, yeah, that's evidence, that's fine. Doesn't mean the evidence is very strong. So if you get to play detective and lawyer and say, hang on a minute, would this actually hold up in court? Is this strong enough of a reason to believe this? The more you investigate, the more you're like, actually, this was very shaky ground, but I was a child and I just internalized this without being able to question it. But as an adult, I can now question it, I can reframe it, and I can change my entire outlook on things. And that in and of itself allows you to be way more positive about things that you were very cautious and safe about. But the EFT tapping and changing everything means that you are creating new subconscious beliefs that are healthy, that are allowing you to say, yes, I'm open to receiving. So I find this like crazy insightful at the moment, and I've been writing like conscious beliefs, subconscious beliefs, and I've been investigating a bit of EFT tapping to kind of see how I can reframe these things. But it's really interesting because when you start doing work like this, I found this week random things will pop up and I'll kind of say to myself, I've always felt blocked in this area, but maybe it's because I've always believed this. And I don't have to believe that now. I know why it's there. I can link it to an exact experience, but then I can go back into that experience, that memory, and change it into a positive, and kind of realize that it is safe to let go of that memory and to be open to new things. It's just very, very interesting. So if any of that appeals to you, I would highly recommend this book. It is a bit girly. She does have a podcast as well called Big Conversations. But if you're interested in anything like that, I think it obviously is a bit spiritual, quite spiritual, but it's more about neurological rewiring. So it's kind of, some people would say pseudoscience, I guess, but it's all about perspective change. And basically your neurological pathways have been built on what is safe and comfortable, not necessarily what is right, in terms of like, it's been safe for your brain to say, oh, I couldn't be good at that, or I couldn't be happy with that. And so as you've gone through life, you've found evidence to make that pathway thicker and bigger by saying, oh yes, see, that person didn't want to go out with me. Oh, see, I got rejected for that job. So see, I'm just not meant to have those things. That's not necessarily true, but you're finding evidence in your external environment to validate whatever you've decided is the safest route. But just as easily as you've done that, you can change that. So if you decide to say, do you know what? I am lucky and good things happen to me. you can consciously in your day-to-day go around and say, okay, I'm finding examples of that. The fact that I got a discount for my coffee today, the fact that the bus arrived on time, the fact that I sailed through green lights today, the fact that it was so easy to pick up my child today. Like, you can find it and build evidence, and then that pathway will get thicker and the more negative one will diminish because you'll be constantly looking in your environment for the good stuff. So I don't know if this helped at all because it's kind of rambly, but if anybody's interested in me doing more specific videos on the 3 kind of elements in this book, explaining the exercises that were in them and why they're helpful and kind of how I've used this book to help, then I would happily do more videos on this. But I kind of just think this is really useful for so many people, because once you go into the drawers of your mind and realize why things are there, but also that you can change them, kind of just exploring that internal world a bit is really profound. And I think it could be helpful for a lot of people. Even just taking like 30% of this book and applying it would help you have a more positive outlook. So yeah, I would highly recommend this book, and I would highly recommend trying to challenge your internal beliefs this week. So try and go around and look for evidence of positive things, that you are worthy of love, worthy of career progression, worthy of financial success. Find evidence of it and see if that kind of changes your outlook.